The T-1000 was unlike any Terminator seen before. It was an evolution in design. Not only did it scare mankind, but even its creator Skynet. For the T-1000's capabilities were far beyond the machines that came before it. So let's take a look into this monster. The T-1000 was an extremely rare prototype, with only 2 known T-1000s ever being created. This happened deep within Skynet's main complex in a heavily fortified chamber. At the centre stood a massive machine press, stretching from floor to ceiling. Feeder pipes extended from the walls, converging on the press like spokes on a wheel, delivering the mimetic polyalloy into the moulding chamber. Between 2 colossal 20-ton plates, the liquid alloy was poured and then hydraulically compressed, forming the shape of a humanoid figure. As the alloy settled, it solidified, establishing the T-1000's default molecular structure. This advanced Terminator was built using cutting-edge technologies developed by Skynet. Each molecule of the T-1000 functioned as a miniature version of the entire machine, containing the essential blueprints necessary for constructing the whole unit. This self-replicating design allowed the T-1000 to maintain its integrity and adaptability, and the resources and time to create even a single model would have most likely been staggering, requiring precision down to the last molecule in the design. The T-1000 itself was very different from previous designs. Instead of being built around a solid endo or exoskeleton, the T-1000 was made entirely of a hyper-advanced mimetic polyalloy. This material was something that would change the future war forever. It had amazing qualities that would make any Terminator made from it almost unstoppable. The mimetic polyalloy allowed the T-1000 to change shape at will. Think of this Terminator not a solid, but a liquid that could slip through bars, cracks in walls, and even slither through pipes. It gave the T-1000 frightening infiltration abilities, being able to bypass almost any security and then change back into a more humanoid form, at which point it could wreak havoc. Imagine the scenario of a resistance base. It has perimeter guards with dogs, backed by armoured vehicles and heavy weapons. Defences are very capable of destroying something like a T-800, but the T-1000 does not even worry about the anti-infiltration measures. It liquefies itself and searches the outer perimeter for a tiny crack in the base's walls. It slowly leaks through, and once it's in, forms back up, and then in its humanoid form, it starts to unleash terror upon the unsuspecting occupants. The T-1000 not only could use its form to traverse, but also to make lethal solid shapes such as knives or swords, or even blunt force instruments such as hammers. It has been recorded that the T-1000 could make its arms into a javelin-style weapon and throw it with the force capable of penetrating and impaling a T-800, after which it could reabsorb the javelin back into itself. It could even copy keys to unlock doors, and use its various shapes to even force open doors if it was in a rush. In situations where the T-1000 might need extra limbs, such as if it was flying a helicopter, it could form a third arm to use a gun to engage a target while it keeps pursuit. This flexibility made it an invaluable operative in missions that required solo adaptability. The T-1000 could also use its polyalloy to copy any person's image as long as they had a similar size and shape as the original T-1000's proportions, though it could mimic larger forms, but this caused a fair amount of stress on the polyalloy. All it had to do is get vision on the individual and it would be able to make an exact match. We see this in Terminator 2 where it takes the form of a police officer, and then when hunting a young John Connor, impersonates his foster mother and copies her voice with perfection, and while doing this even kills John's foster dad with a sharp limb weapon whilst keeping the facade up. A truly amazing show of its abilities to multitask. It did appearance, voice, shapeshifting and termination all in one. Now, was this due to the fact that it took the shape of a woman and they can multitask better? We'll never know, but I do like to think so. The fact that the T-1000 could change its appearance so quick was insane. 1 minute it's a 6'2" white man who entered a resistance base, then it's a 5'7" black lady walking the halls looking for the commanding officer of the resistance cell. This would make tracking it down and identifying who is a machine mind-blowing, and would lead to paranoia and most likely humans being shot in a case of mistaken identity. Now, the T-1000 did have some slight disadvantages compared to the T-800, as its polyalloy could not replicate bodily fluids such as blood or sweat, so in terms of pure realistic infiltration abilities, the T-800 does slightly win, but the T-1000 was more difficult to spot by dogs, then being rather confused by its presence, though over time they tended to catch on to it being not a normal human, and would need to be dealt with before they alerted humans around the area, and plasma started flying. The polyalloy also gave the T-1000 a durability on an almost godly scale, with it being able to take a ridiculous amount of physical punishment, anything from being shot with handguns, shotguns, machine guns of various calibers, or hit with high explosives or grenades. All these would do is cause a separating effect on the polyalloy, Now this did stun the T-1000, with one larger damage taking more time for it to rebind, but it didn't kill or permanently damage the T-1000. So you may stun it for a time, but once you run out of ammo, it will simply get up and move into your position. This makes killing a T-1000 a very special task. You need weapons with particular qualities, the main one being extreme heat in excess of 1535 degrees Celsius, but even this must be applied in large amounts, for a period of at least 30 seconds. Small bursts of heat like of a high explosive anti-tank weapon could do some damage, but not nearly enough to neutralise the T-1000. Lower temperatures do interfere with its camouflage, making the T-1000 default back to its base form, so if it walks through fire it would flicker back to its normal humanoid silver form, but still this does no lasting damage. Now high caliber weapons like autocannons or large caliber artillery in the 155mm range would be able to blow apart a T-1000, but it wouldn't kill it. According to its abilities, this would cause the mimetic polyalloy to separate and may stun it for a time, at which point it would begin to regroup and reform. Now the distance in which the alloy could reform is 8.7 miles. This is mind-boggling, but it makes it almost impossible to just destroy the T-1000 with brute force, and even if you're able to separate large amounts of the alloy beyond 8.7 miles, these pieces can blend in with the local area, camouflaging themselves until the T-1000 moves into range, at which point it can then reform. In Terminator 2, we do see a T-1000 become frozen, and if it hadn't been shot inside of a very hot smelting building, the freezing would have worked, but I doubt most people have a tanker of liquid nitrogen available. Acid is also pretty effective at destabilising and in larger amounts neutralising the T-1000, but this would obviously have to be on the far end of the pH scale, and having large amounts of acid available is also very difficult. And as we saw in Terminator 2, when the T-1000 was reforming from being frozen, the polyalloy began to mimic whatever it had contact with. This is the emergency response to keep it safe in case of severe separation and damage, and would be very effective in active combat situations, with it being difficult to track down individual pieces of the T-1000 on an active battlefield. I will mention that the more of its form the T-1000 loses, the less effective it becomes in terms of strength and speed, so it definitely helps to weaken it by separating it, but it's not a killing blow. I bet a lot of you are screeching at the screen just use plasma. Well, the T-1000 can even reform from plasma weapon damage. 1 or 2 shots is definitely survivable, so you have to absolutely rinse the T-1000 with plasma to make sure that it would die. The T-1000 can even take powerful electric shocks and is far more resistant to electromagnetic pulse weapons than most Terminators. And the polyalloy seems not to be very magnetic, meaning weapons such as a magnetic mine would be less effective against the T-1000. And how was the T-1000 able to even do this? Well, thanks to its next generation intelligence, it possesses a liquid molecular brain formed by its mimetic polyalloy, granting it advanced reasoning, emotions like humour, and even self-awareness, and this would grow stronger over time with the T-1000 learning to become almost indistinguishable from an ordinary human in terms of emotional responses. It could also form bonds with people, even in a sense caring for them. This autonomy allows a T-1000 to make independent decisions, and each nanoparticle within the T-1000 functions as a self-contained unit, collectively forming a hive mind of billions. This also made it practically impossible to reprogram, and if you did disable a T-1000 and try to reprogram it, even if a single molecule of its original alloy was separated then rejoined, it would revert back to its entire original form, and it would have its original state of mind and likely hunt down and kill you. And what's really frightening is the T-1000 had its full intelligence and independence from the exact moment it was created. After that, the only way Skynet could communicate with it was by voice, and even then it was up to the T-1000 if it would actually comply. However, the loss of mass does diminish its efficiency. If it sustains severe damage as being torn apart by an explosion, it becomes incapable of completing its objectives until it can regenerate. This advanced level of intelligence also has its downsides though, with the T-1000 sometimes acting against Skynet's directives. So to prevent potential threats from its own creation, Skynet chose not to mass produce the T-1000 and eventually discontinued the model. It was only deployed via time travel to terminate John Connor as Skynet had become desperate and it began to lose the future war. And this self-awareness also explains why later iterations such as the T-1001 seemingly went rogue. The fact that each piece of polyalloy has the same abilities gives the T-1000 some very cool sensors. For instance, when it comes to seeing, technically it didn't see through its eyes, but from every part of its body, meaning you could not sneak up on it, and it could hear you through every part of itself as well, giving it fantastic situational awareness. In Terminator 2, we obviously didn't see this, as it was more of a sci-fi action film, and a lot of the lore comes after the movies. The T-1000 can also read magnetically encoded data, genetic information, and could analyse pretty much any local environmental data, making it fantastic at gathering intel for its missions. One property the T-1000 does possess is it can use a small amount of its polyalloy to reanimate damaged machines. So if a T-800 was taken out, the T-1000 could spend some of its form to get the T-800 back in the fight, but now it's under the control of the T-1000, not necessarily Skynet. Now the strength and speed of the T-1000 are exceptional. Starting with its speed, well, it's able to chase down a car running over 40 miles per hour in Terminator 2, and it's reported that it can excel this speeds up to 60 miles per hour. The fact that it's a single form with no moving parts means these speeds can be kept up indefinitely, and it will not cause any damage to the T-1000. Strength-wise, we have no official numbers, but the T-1000 is vastly stronger than the T-800, easily beating one in a fight. Its strength is an odd topic, as most situations where this might be applied, the T-1000 would use its superior intelligence and ability to shapeshift to overcome any obstacle. But I do personally think the T-1000 could beat any Terminator prior to it in terms of strength, and with its ability to create different forms, it could concentrate this strength into a very small point, causing massive damage, even going straight through other Terminators' bodies, with relative ease. Now an odd question arises, could the T-1000 apply its full strength when in a fully liquidated form? So for instance, when passing under a door in a puddle-like form, could it throw someone into the roof if it was stepped on? If so, the T-1000 becomes the ultimate invisible assassin, being able to camouflage as a floor, wall or ceiling and just kill people through very odd accidents. I imagine Agent 47 is reading this, jealous and absolutely raging right now. These superior physical and shape-shifting abilities makes the T-1000 brutal in combat. It had every bit of data available from Skynet in terms of combat styles and experience from previously deployed Terminators. This leads to it being able to fight multiple opponents at once in close quarters, with strikes from it killing a human easily in a single blow. And if it's fighting tougher opponents such as T-800s, it was able to make weapons at will. It can easily form something like a hammer weapon to smash a T-800's head in and damage its CPU. It could even then make a dagger and shove it straight through a T-800's ears. And even if you grab the T-1000, it can shapeshift out of your grapples and get the advantage over you. It's literally an impossible fight in close quarters, and your best bet is trying to stun it and then fleeing from the T-1000. And even if you create distance, well, the T-1000 can use any range weapon that a human or T-series model can. All small arms and heavy weapons can be used with precision, with it knowing exactly where to target and being able to calculate bullet trajectories. And with its advanced optical abilities, the T-1000 doesn't need such frivolities as laser sights or scopes. Now the fact that it can be stunned from ballistic damage does mean if you engage in a firefight, with enough people and ammo, you can fairly effectively stun the T-1000 and flee. In a large-scale battle, this means the T-1000 is quite vulnerable, but with its advanced infiltration skills, I doubt it would allow itself to be drawn into such a situation. The T-1000's power source is unknown, but my theory is each individual molecule of polyalloy has either an exceptionally powerful energy charge that can keep it going for years, or each molecule has some kind of micro-energy production method that can produce almost infinite energy for the T-1000. It could also have the ability to recharge from environmental sources of energy, but your guesses are as good as mine in those terms. And if all this wasn't scary enough, there are even more variations of the T-1000. The first is the T-1001, a true evolution. This one possessed even greater adaptability and mobility. Unlike its predecessor, which primarily mimics human forms, the T-1001 could morph into a sleek, slug-like or snake-like metallic form, allowing it to travel at incredible speeds through air vents, narrow passageways and even pipelines. This ability granted it a level of maneuverability far beyond that of other Terminator models. It could launch itself into high-speed leaps, closing vast distances in seconds, and propel effortlessly through water, utilising its shape-shifting nature for both stealth and attack. One of the T-1001's most remarkable advancements was its ability to control detached portions of itself independently. Unlike the T-1000, whose separated parts instinctively sought to rejoin the main body, this made the T-1001 not only more flexible, but also more strategically capable. It could deploy pieces of itself as surveillance drones, weapons, or even traps while remaining fully functional. Next we have the T-1002 Terminator. This represents a significant advancement over its predecessors. Now it has even more control over its molecular structure, allowing it to manifest stabbing weapons across its entire body simultaneously. This capability transforms the T-1002 into a walking arsenal. It's able to strike in multiple directions at once, overwhelming its opponents with sheer lethality. I would say these models seem ideal for close quarters combat, where it could move at speed while tearing its foes apart. The next model is linked to the polyalloy, but it is not a direct version of the T-1000, but it's kind of similar in some ways. It's the T-1,000,000, also known as the T-Meg. It's a colossal spider-like non-humanoid hunter-killer, constructed entirely from mimetic polyalloy, the same liquid metal used in the T-1000. Unlike its humanoid counterpart, however, the T-1,000,000 is not designed for infiltration or disguise, but serves as a heavily fortified guardian of Skynet's central core. Towering over most other Terminator units, the T-1,000,000 is capable of seamlessly blending into its environment by mimicking structural components of Skynet's core. When inactive, it may appear as an extension of the complex itself, perhaps as walls, conduits, or even parts of the control mainframe, until an intruder is detected. At that moment, it metamorphosizes into a default combat configuration, a massive arachnid-like killing machine with 8 razor-sharp bladed appendages. Each of these limbs can shift and reshape into lethal stabbing, slashing, or crushing weapons, making the T-1,000,000 an unparalleled melee combatant. While it lacks the ability to replicate human forms like the T-1000, its raw size, durability, and adaptability make it one of Skynet's deadliest creations. Its mimetic nature also grants it an extraordinary degree of self-repair, allowing it to reconstruct damaged sections almost instantly. As the last line of defense for Skynet's core, the T-1,000,000 is specifically programmed to eliminate any and all intruders attempting to breach the AI's most vital infrastructure. Any hostile forces infiltrating Skynet's mainframe would find themselves facing not just an advanced combat unit, but an unstoppable self-regenerating force that can strike from any angle, using its shape-shifting abilities to trap, crush, and impale its enemies. At least 2 confirmed T-1,000,000 units have been sighted, both guarding key locations within Skynet's primary installations. While their exact numbers remain unknown, it is theorized that multiple T-Meg units may exist across various strategic sites, each ensuring that no human resistance force can reach and destroy Skynet's critical command systems. And with its immense power, regenerative capabilities, and deadly arsenal, the T-1,000,000 stands as one of Skynet's most formidable guardians. I think the video proves the lethality and adaptability of the T-1000 models, and if Skynet had been able to create these en masse, we may have seen a different outcome in the future war, though it would have most likely been with the T-1000 reigning supreme over humanity and Skynet. Anyway, thanks for watching everyone, you guys make it all worth it, and you have a beautiful evening.